She took a job in Seoul, then found out her Korean billionaire boss was her one-night stand. The city of Seoul glowed like a sea of stars beneath the night sky. For Ewatomi, it felt unreal. Just 24 hours ago, she had been standing at the airport in Lagos, clutching a boarding pass and a dream that felt far too big for someone like her. Now she stood in the middle of Itaewon, one of Seoul's most vibrant nightlife districts, surrounded by neon lights, laughter, and music pouring out of crowded clubs. Everything felt alive. Everything felt new. Ewatomi pulled her coat tighter around herself as the cool evening breeze brushed against her skin. The unfamiliar air smelled faintly of street food, rain, and possibility. She checked her phone again. No new messages. No calls from home. For the first time in years, she felt completely alone in a foreign city. And strangely, she liked it. Because tomorrow, reality would begin. Tomorrow she would walk into the headquarters of Hanyul Tech Group, one of Korea's most powerful technology companies, and start the job she had worked so hard to earn. But tonight she wanted to breathe. To celebrate. To feel like the brave woman who had crossed continents for a better future. Her friend from the language exchange group had convinced her to visit a popular club in Itaewon before her first day of work. You can't come to Seoul and not experience the nightlife, her friend had insisted. Ewatomi wasn't normally the clubbing type. But tonight felt different. Tonight felt like the beginning of a new life. Inside the club, the music pulsed through the floor like a heartbeat. Colored lights flashed across the crowd as people laughed, danced, and shouted over the rhythm. Ewatomi stood near the bar, nervously stirring her drink. She watched people around her, students, business professionals, travelers from all over the world. Seoul suddenly felt much bigger than she imagined. First time here. The voice came from beside her. Deep, calm, confident. Ewatomi turned her head. And for a brief moment, she forgot how to breathe. The man standing next to her was striking. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a simple black suit that somehow looked far more expensive than anything she had ever seen. His dark hair fell slightly across his forehead, and his sharp features carried a quiet intensity. But it was his eyes that caught her attention. They were focused, observant, like he noticed things most people ignored. She laughed softly. Is it that obvious? He tilted his head slightly, studying her. Only to someone who notices everything. Something about the way he said it made her smile. He didn't look like someone who belonged in a crowded nightclub. If anything, he looked like the kind of man who controlled the room without saying a word. Are you visiting Seoul? He asked. I just moved here, she replied. I start work tomorrow. Tomorrow? Big day. He nodded slowly. What kind of work? Ewatomi hesitated before answering. Hanyul Tech. For the first time, something flickered in his eyes. Surprise. But it disappeared almost immediately. That's impressive, he said calmly. Ewatomi shrugged modestly. I got lucky. No, he replied quietly. You probably didn't. Something about his tone made her pause. Then he extended his hand. I'm Junhyuk. His grip was firm, warm. I'm Ewatomi. They talked for hours. About traveling to new places. About leaving home behind. About the strange loneliness that comes with chasing big dreams. Junhyuk was different from anyone she had met. He listened carefully. He asked thoughtful questions. And sometimes he would fall silent, simply watching her speak with a faint smile. It felt strangely comfortable. Like talking to someone she had known for years. Eventually the music faded into the background, and the crowd around them began thinning out. Outside, a gentle rain had begun to fall. The streets shimmered under neon reflections as taxis rolled by and distant laughter echoed through the night. Ewatomi stepped out under the awning, breathing in the cool air. I should probably go, she said softly. First day tomorrow. Junhyuk looked at her for a long moment. Then he said quietly, walk with me. They strolled down the quiet street, the city glowing around them like a dream. The rain turned into a soft mist. At some point their conversation slowed. Not because they had nothing to say, but because the silence between them felt easy, comfortable. When they finally reached her hotel entrance, Ewatomi turned to face him. Well, she said with a nervous smile. Thank you for the company. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Junhyuk spoke, his voice softer than before. Tonight felt rare. Ewatomi felt a strange warmth spread through her chest. I know what you mean. Sometimes life gives you moments that feel separate from the rest of the world. Moments where two strangers meet without expectations. Without pressure. Without knowing what tomorrow will bring. That night became one of those moments. A quiet connection neither of them planned. And neither of them expected to matter. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the hotel window. Ewatomi slowly opened her eyes. The other side of the bed was empty. For a brief second, she wondered if the entire night had been a dream. Then she noticed a folded piece of paper on the bedside table. She picked it up. Written in neat handwriting were a few simple words. "Thank you for a beautiful night. J.H." Ewatomi smiled softly. She placed the note back on the table and stretched. It had been unexpected. Unforgettable. But it was just one night. A memory. Nothing more. After all, what were the chances she would ever see him again? She had no idea that in just a few hours, she would walk into the headquarters of Hanyul Tech, look up during her welcome meeting, and discover something that would change everything. Because the mysterious stranger from the nightclub was about to walk into the room. As her boss. Morning arrived faster than Ewatomi expected. Sunlight poured through the tall glass windows of her small hotel room, casting golden lines across the floor. The city of Seoul was already alive outside. Cars moving in perfect rhythm, people walking briskly down the sidewalks, and towering buildings reflecting the early morning light. Ewatomi stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the collar of her blouse for the third time. Her nerves were kicking in. Today wasn't just any day. Today was her first day at Hanyul Tech Group. The opportunity she had worked toward for years. The opportunity that had taken her thousands of miles away from home. She inhaled deeply. "You've got this," she whispered to herself. Within an hour, she was standing outside the massive glass building that dominated the skyline. The headquarters of Hanyul Tech. It was even more impressive in person. The building stretched high into the sky like a crystal tower, its reflective walls shining under the morning sun. People in sharp suits moved confidently in and out of the revolving doors. Everyone looked like they belonged there. Everyone except her. For a brief moment, doubt crept into her mind. Do I really deserve to be here? But she quickly shook the thought away. She had worked hard for this. She had earned this. Squaring her shoulders, Ewatomi stepped inside. The lobby alone was breathtaking. Polished marble floors reflected the overhead lights, while massive digital screens displayed the company's newest innovations. Employees moved quickly through the space, greeting each other with respectful bows and quiet conversations. A receptionist guided her toward the orientation area on the 20th floor. As the elevator doors closed, Ewatomi stared at the rising floor numbers. Her heart beat a little faster with every second. When the doors opened, she stepped into a sleek conference room where several new employees had already gathered. Some were chatting nervously. Others were scrolling through their phones. Ewatomi quietly took a seat near the end of the long table. A cheerful HR manager stood at the front of the room. "Good morning, everyone," the woman said brightly. "Welcome to Hanyul Tech Group. We're excited to have you join us." Ewatomi listened carefully as the presentation began. The company's history. Its global influence. Its billion-dollar innovations. Then the HR manager said something that immediately caught everyone's attention. "And in a few minutes," she announced with excitement, "our CEO will personally welcome you." The room instantly became quiet. Even the confident-looking employees straightened their posture. Ewatomi leaned slightly toward the woman sitting beside her. "Is the CEO usually this involved?" she whispered. The woman shook her head quickly. "Never," she murmured. "This is rare." That made Ewatomi even more curious. She had heard rumors about the CEO of Hanyul Tech. A young billionaire. A genius businessman. Extremely private. Very few people had ever seen him up close. The HR manager glanced at her watch. He's here." Every employee stood up immediately. Ewatomi followed their lead, though she wasn't sure why. Then the conference room doors slowly opened. Two assistants stepped in first. And behind them, a tall man walked in with calm, effortless authority. The air in the room shifted instantly. He didn't speak. He didn't rush. Yet every person in the room seemed to hold their breath as he approached the front of the table. Ewatomi lifted her eyes to see the face of the man everyone feared and admired. And the world seemed to stop. Her heart skipped. Her breath vanished. Because the man standing there was him. The stranger from the nightclub. The man from the hotel room. The man whose note still sat on her bedside table. Jun Hyuk. But now he wasn't just Jun Hyuk. He was introduced by the HR manager with clear pride. Everyone, please welcome our CEO, Kang Jun-hyuk. The name echoed through Iwatomi's mind like thunder. CEO. Billionaire. Her boss. Her stomach dropped. Across the room, Jun-hyuk's eyes moved calmly across the group of new employees. Professional. Unreadable. Until they landed on her. For a split second, his expression froze. It was so brief that no one else seemed to notice. But Ewatomi saw it. Shock. Recognition. And something else she couldn't quite name. Then just as quickly, the billionaire CEO regained his composure. His face returned to the calm mask of authority. He addressed the room in a steady, commanding voice. Welcome to Hanyul Tech. His gaze moved away from her as if nothing had happened. You are selected because you are among the most capable individuals in your fields. He paused briefly. We do not hire people who settle for ordinary results. The employees listened carefully, hanging on every word. Ewatomi tried to focus. But her mind was racing. He didn't tell me. He never said he was the CEO. Oh my God. Jun-hyuk continued speaking. At Hanyul Tech, your ideas matter. Your effort matters. But your integrity matters most. His tone remained calm. Powerful. Completely controlled. Yet every time his gaze swept across the room, Ewatomi felt like the temperature dropped. Because she knew something no one else in that room knew. Just hours ago, she had been wrapped in the arms of the most powerful man in the building. When the speech ended, the employees bowed politely. Thank you, sir, they said together. Jun-hyuk nodded once. Then turned toward the exit. But before leaving, he paused. Just slightly. His eyes flickered back toward Ewatomi for the briefest moment. Not long enough for anyone else to notice. But long enough for her heart to start racing again. Then he walked out of the room. The moment the door closed behind him, the room exploded with whispers. Did you see him? He's even more intimidating in person. He's so young. That's Kang Jun-hyuk, the billionaire genius. Ewatomi sat frozen in her chair. Her hands slowly tightened around the notebook on the table. Because a terrifying realization had just hit her. The man she had spent the night with, the man whose face she could barely stop thinking about, was not a stranger at all. He was the CEO of the company she had just joined. And starting today, he controlled her entire career. But what she didn't know yet was that Kang Jun-hyuk was sitting in his private office upstairs, staring out at the city skyline, thinking about the exact same thing. Because fate had just placed the one woman he couldn't forget inside his company, and dangerously close to his world. For the first few days after the shocking discovery, Ewatomi tried to convince herself that everything would be fine. It had only been one night. A brief, unexpected moment between two strangers in a city full of millions of people. Surely, they could both pretend it never happened. At least, that's what she hoped. Her new office was located on the 32nd floor of the Hanyul Tech building. From the tall windows, the skyline of Seoul stretched endlessly. Bridges crossing the Han River, towers glowing with glass reflections, and traffic moving like flowing light beneath the afternoon sun. It was the kind of view people dreamed about. Yet Ewatomi could barely enjoy it. Her mind kept replaying the moment from the orientation meeting. The shock in Jun-hyuk's eyes. The brief second where the calm billionaire CEO had looked just as stunned as she felt. But since that moment, he had acted like nothing had happened. 3 days had passed. 3 days of silence. 3 days where the CEO of Hanyul Tech behaved exactly as a CEO should, professional, distant, and completely focused on business. If anything, he treated her more formally than the other employees. Which somehow made things worse. Ewatomi sat at her desk reviewing project files when her colleague Minji rolled her chair closer. Ewatomi, she whispered dramatically. Ewatomi looked up. What? Minji glanced around before leaning closer. The CEO is coming to the department meeting today. Ewatomi's heart skipped slightly. Oh, really? Minji nodded excitedly. He rarely visits departments personally. People say he's incredibly strict. Ewatomi forced a small smile. Strict? That wasn't the word she would have used. Her mind flashed briefly to the quiet intensity in his eyes that night. The way he listened when she spoke. The softness in his voice during certain moments. She quickly pushed the memory away. Don't worry, Minji added. Just try not to make eye contact with him too long. People say he can read minds. Ewatomi laughed nervously. If only you knew. An hour later, The entire department gathered inside a sleek conference room. Employees lined the long table, laptops open, presentations ready. The room buzzed with quiet anticipation. Then the doors opened, and Kang Junhyuk walked in. Just like before, the atmosphere shifted instantly. He wore a dark charcoal suit that fit perfectly, his posture straight and confident as he moved through the room. His expression was calm, almost unreadable, yet his presence carried a quiet authority that made everyone sit a little straighter. Ewatomi kept her eyes focused on her notes. She didn't dare look up. "Good afternoon," Junhyuk said. His voice was steady, controlled. The meeting began. Managers presented project updates while Junhyuk listened carefully, occasionally asking short but precise questions. He didn't waste words. Every comment he made cut directly to the core of the issue. The employees answered quickly, clearly nervous under his gaze. Then suddenly, "Miss Ewatomi." Her heart stopped. Slowly, she lifted her head. Junhyuk was looking directly at her. The entire room turned toward her as well. "Yes, sir," she said carefully. He studied her for a brief moment before speaking. "I reviewed your analysis on the international market expansion proposal." Ewatomi blinked. He read her report? "It was thorough," he continued calmly. "But your projections for Southeast Asia could be stronger." Relief mixed with surprise. This wasn't about their past. It was about work. "Yes, sir," she replied quickly. "I'll revise it." "Good." His gaze lingered on her for half a second longer before moving on. The meeting continued. But Ewatomi could barely focus anymore. Because now she understood something important. He wasn't ignoring her. He was deliberately keeping things professional. Almost too professional. Later that evening, most employees had gone home. But Ewatomi remained at her desk finishing the revisions he had suggested. The office floor had grown quiet. The lights dimmed slightly as the night shift security system activated. She stretched her arms and sighed softly. Just a little more work and she could finally leave. Then she heard footsteps behind her. Slow. Calm. Her stomach tightened. She turned in her chair. Junhyuk stood a few feet away. Without his suit jacket, his white shirt sleeves rolled neatly to his elbows. The formal CEO appearance had softened slightly, making him look closer to the man she met at the nightclub. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "You work late," he said finally. His voice was quieter now. Less formal. Ewatomi nodded slowly. "Just finishing the revisions you suggested." He stepped closer, glancing at the screen. "You didn't have to do them tonight." "I wanted to." Silence settled between them. It felt strangely familiar. Like the quiet moments they had shared while walking through the rainy streets that night. Finally, he spoke again. "You didn't know who I was." It wasn't a question. Ewatomi shook her head. "No." Another pause. Then something unexpected happened. A faint smile touched his lips. "Good." She blinked. "Good." He leaned lightly against the edge of her desk. "For one night, someone talked to me without knowing what I owned, or what I controlled." His eyes met hers. And that was rare. Ewatomi felt her heartbeat quicken. "I didn't mean to cause trouble," she said quietly. "You didn't. But people might talk if they knew." "They won't," he said calmly. His confidence made it sound like a simple fact. Not a possibility, but a guarantee. Still, the tension between them lingered. "So, what happens now?" she asked. Junhyuk looked at her carefully. The same way he had looked at her in the club. Like he was trying to understand something deeper than her words. Then he straightened. "Now," he said softly, "you continue doing your job." "And you?" His expression returned to that calm CEO mask. "I continue doing mine." He turned toward the elevator. But before stepping inside, he paused. Without looking back, he added quietly, "Miss Ewatomi." "Yes." For the first time since that night, his voice carried a trace of something warmer. "Try not to work too late." Then the elevator doors closed, leaving Ewatomi standing alone in the quiet office. Her heart still beating faster than it should. Because the truth was becoming impossible to ignore. They had both agreed to pretend nothing had happened. But the silence between them wasn't distance. It was tension. And secrets like theirs had a way of becoming impossible to hide. Kang Junhyuk was a man who built his life on control. Control over his company. Control over his reputation. Control over his emotions. By the age of 30, he had transformed Hanyul Tech from a struggling startup into a global technology powerhouse. Investors respected him, competitors feared him, and employees admired the quiet precision with which he ran his empire. But there was one thing in his life he had never fully mastered: loneliness. From the outside, his life looked perfect: wealth, influence, success. But behind the glass walls of his penthouse and the towering offices of Hanyul Tech, his world was quiet, sometimes painfully so. Relationships had always felt complicated to him. Too many people approached him because of his name. Too many people saw the billionaire before they saw the man. Over time, he stopped trying. Work became easier than emotions. Until one unexpected night in Itaewon. And one unexpected woman. Ewatomi. He had planned to forget that night. It had been a rare moment of freedom. One evening where he could disappear into the crowd and simply exist without being Kang Junhyuk, CEO of Hanyul Tech. When he spoke with her, she had looked at him without hesitation, without calculation. She didn't recognize his name. She didn't care about his power. She simply talked to him like he was normal. That alone had felt dangerous. Because it made him want something he had long ago convinced himself he didn't need. Then fate had done something even more dangerous. It placed her inside his company. Inside his world. Inside his daily life. And no matter how carefully he tried to maintain distance, he kept noticing her. From the glass wall of his executive office on the top floor, Junhyuk could see nearly every department in the building through security screens. Not that he intended to watch her. But sometimes, during long meetings or quiet evenings, his eyes drifted to the monitor showing the International Development Department. And there she would be. Focused. Working carefully. Talking with colleagues. Laughing softly at something someone said. Each time he saw her, something in his chest tightened. Which annoyed him. Because emotions were distractions. And distractions made leaders weak. One afternoon, his assistant knocked on the door. "Sir, the board members have arrived for the strategy meeting." Junhyuk nodded without turning from the window. "I'll be there in 5 minutes." When the assistant left, he exhaled slowly. His reflection stared back at him in the glass. Calm. Collected. Controlled. The same image everyone expected. Yet his thoughts drifted again to the 32nd floor. To the woman who somehow made him lose focus. Later that day, the company cafeteria buzzed with the usual lunchtime crowd. Ewatomi sat at a table with Minji and 2 other co-workers, trying to relax for the first time all morning. Minji leaned closer. "So, what do you think of the CEO?" Ewatomi nearly choked on her drink. What? Minji grinned. "Come on. Everyone has an opinion about Kang Junhyuk." One of the other co-workers laughed. "They say he's a genius but impossible to read." Another added, "and completely married to his work." Minji sighed dramatically. "Still, if he ever looked at me the way he looks at some people in meetings, I would faint." Ewatomi's heart skipped. "What do you mean?" Minji lowered her voice. "Sometimes during meetings, he stares at someone like he's analyzing their soul." Ewatomi forced a laugh. "That sounds terrifying." But inside, her thoughts raced. Does he really look at me differently? Later that evening, she was called to the executive floor for a project discussion. Her hands felt slightly sweaty as she stepped into the elevator. The higher floors of Hanyul Tech were quieter. More private. When the elevator doors opened, a long corridor led to the CEO's office. His assistant greeted her politely. "Mr. Kang will see you now." Ewatomi stepped inside. The office was enormous, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire city. And standing near the glass wall was Junhyuk. He turned slowly when she entered. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then he gestured toward the chair in front of his desk. "Sit." His voice had returned to its formal tone. Ewatomi sat down carefully. He handed her a document. "The board approved the international expansion project. You'll be assisting the strategy team." Her eyes widened. "That's a major project." "Yes. You're assigning it to me." His gaze remained steady. "You're capable." She studied him carefully. "Is that the only reason?" A faint smile appeared. "Is there another reason?" She hesitated. "People in the office are starting to talk." "People always talk," he replied calmly. "But rumors can hurt careers." He leaned slightly forward. "That's why we will continue behaving exactly as we are now. Professional. Distant. Safe." Ewatomi nodded slowly. But something still bothered her. She gathered her courage and said quietly, "You should stop looking at me like that during meetings." One of his eyebrows lifted. Like what? She felt her cheeks warm. Like that night never ended. For a brief moment, the controlled billionaire vanished. The man from Itaewon appeared again. His voice dropped slightly. "For me, it didn't." Silence filled the room. The city lights outside began flickering on as evening settled over Seoul. Ewatomi looked down, trying to steady her breathing. This was dangerous territory. Finally she spoke again. "We can't let that night affect our work." "I know." "Then we should forget it." Jun-hyuk didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked slowly toward the window. The city stretched beneath him like an ocean of light. After a long pause, he said quietly, "I've built my entire life on discipline." Ewatomi waited. "And yet," he continued, "there is one problem I cannot seem to solve." She looked at him. "What problem?" He turned back to face her. His dark eyes held something far more vulnerable than she expected. "You." The word hung between them. Heavy. Unavoidable. And in that moment, Ewatomi realized something that made her heart race even faster. The powerful billionaire CEO of Hanyul Tech was struggling just as much as she was to forget that night. Maybe even more. And if they weren't careful, that secret could change everything. The following weeks at Hanyul Tech moved quickly. Projects intensified. Deadlines grew tighter. And the pressure inside the company increased as the international expansion strategy moved closer to launch. For Ewatomi, the opportunity was both exciting and exhausting. Being chosen to assist with such a major project so early in her career had shocked several senior employees. Some congratulated her warmly. Others simply watched her with quiet curiosity. But Ewatomi knew the truth. Opportunities like this attracted attention. And attention inside a billion-dollar company could be dangerous. Still, she focused on her work. Day after day she analyzed market data, attended strategy meetings, and prepared presentations for senior executives. Her dedication did not go unnoticed. Especially by one person. Kang Jun-hyuk. He rarely spoke to her outside official meetings. When he did, his tone remained strictly professional. Yet sometimes she felt his eyes on her during presentations. Observing. Studying. Noticing details others ignored. And each time it happened, her heart betrayed her with a small, nervous flutter. Meanwhile, whispers had begun to move quietly through the glass corridors of Hanyul Tech. At first, they were harmless. "Did you see how the CEO complimented her report? Isn't she the new international analyst? She's surprisingly confident for a new employee." But whispers had a way of growing. One afternoon in the cafeteria, Minji leaned across the table toward Ewatomi. "You're getting popular." Ewatomi frowned. "That doesn't sound good." Minji lowered her voice. "People are saying the CEO notices you more than anyone else in meetings." Ewatomi forced a casual laugh. "He notices everyone." "No," Minji said, shaking her head. "Not like that." Ewatomi's stomach tightened slightly. "Minji." "I'm serious," Minji continued. "Some people think you're his new favorite employee." Ewatomi quickly shook her head. "That's ridiculous." "Maybe," Minji admitted. "But you know how office politics works." Ewatomi did know. And that night, those words echoed in her mind as she worked late again on the expansion proposal. The office had become quiet. Most lights were off. Only a few desks still glowed in the dim evening. She rubbed her eyes, trying to stay focused. Then her computer screen flickered. An email notification appeared. From Executive Office. Subject, meeting tomorrow, final strategy review. Ewatomi opened the message quickly. The board of directors would attend. Senior executives. And of course, Kang Jun-hyuk. She closed the email slowly. Tomorrow would be important. But she had no idea how dangerous it was about to become. The next morning, the atmosphere inside Hanyul Tech felt tense. The board members had arrived early. Black luxury cars lined the entrance of the building. Inside the executive conference room, several powerful figures sat around the massive glass table. These were the investors and directors who controlled billions of dollars. And they were not all friendly toward Kang Jun-hyuk. Across the room sat Director Park. An older man with sharp eyes and a calculating smile. For years, he had quietly challenged Jun-hyuk's leadership decisions. He respected the young CEO's intelligence. But he didn't trust his independence. Director Park believed the company should be controlled by the board, not by one brilliant but stubborn billionaire. Today, he intended to apply pressure. The meeting began smoothly. Executives presented reports. Financial charts appeared on large digital screens. Then the discussion turned to international expansion. Miss Ewatomi, one executive said, please present the Southeast Asia market analysis. Ewatomi stood and walked confidently to the front of the room. Her presentation was clear, detailed, convincing. Even the skeptical board members listened carefully. When she finished, a quiet moment passed. Then Junhyuk spoke. Excellent work. His tone was calm, but his praise carried weight. Around the table, several directors exchanged glances. Director Park leaned back in his chair slowly. Impressive presentation, he said. Ewatomi nodded politely. Thank you, sir. Park folded his hands together. Tell me, how long have you worked at Hanyul Tech? 3 weeks. The room went silent. Park raised an eyebrow. 3 weeks. A faint murmur moved across the table. That's quite fast for someone so new to present to the board, he continued. Junhyuk's expression remained unreadable. She earned the opportunity, he said calmly. Park smiled slightly. I'm sure she did. But his eyes moved slowly between Junhyuk and Ewatomi, studying, calculating. Then he said something that made the room colder. Still, it's unusual for our CEO to personally mentor new employees so quickly. The implication hung heavily in the air. Ewatomi felt heat rise in her cheeks. Junhyuk remained perfectly calm. She produced the strongest analysis, he replied. Nothing more. Park's smile widened slightly. Of course. But everyone in the room could feel the tension. The meeting ended soon after. Executives quietly gathered their files. Board members left the room in small groups. Ewatomi packed her laptop slowly, her hands slightly unsteady. Then she felt a presence beside her. Junhyuk. Come with me, he said quietly. His voice was calm, but firm. She followed him down the hallway toward his office. The moment the door closed behind them, she turned toward him. That was bad, she said. Yes. Director Park suspects something. He suspects many things, Junhyuk replied calmly. But this could affect the project. He nodded slowly. I know. Ewatomi crossed her arms. This is exactly what I was worried about. Junhyuk studied her expression carefully. Are you afraid? She hesitated, then answered honestly. A little. His voice softened slightly. You shouldn't be. That's easy for you to say, she replied. You're the billionaire CEO. And you're the woman who just impressed an entire board of directors. The words surprised her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Junhyuk stepped closer. Listen to me carefully, he said quietly. No matter what rumors begin circulating, your work speaks for itself. Ewatomi met his eyes. And if they don't believe that? His expression hardened slightly. Then they will answer to me. The confidence in his voice was undeniable. But Ewatomi still felt uneasy. Because something else had begun moving inside the walls of Hanyul Tech. Director Park had noticed her. And powerful men rarely ask questions without planning their next move. As Ewatomi left the office, she had no idea that Park was already speaking with other board members in a private lounge downstairs. And his next words carried a dangerous tone. That girl, he said quietly. She may be more important to our CEO than we realized. The other director leaned forward. What are you suggesting? Park's smile was thin. I'm suggesting we find out exactly how important she is. And in that moment, Ewatomi unknowingly became the center of a corporate storm that could threaten both her future and the empire Kang Junhyuk had spent his entire life building. Rumors in a company the size of Hanyul Tech didn't stay whispers for long. They traveled. Quietly at first, then faster. Like wind moving through glass hallways. By the end of the week, something had shifted inside the building. Employees who once greeted Ewatomi warmly now watched her a little longer. Some conversations stopped when she entered a room. Others lowered their voices when she walked past. Ewatomi noticed. Of course she noticed. She just pretended she didn't. Inside the International Development Office, Minji leaned closer to her desk one afternoon. Okay, something strange is happening. Ewatomi kept typing. What do you mean? Minji glanced around before whispering. People from finance were asking about you today. Ewatomi finally looked up. Why? They wanted to know how you got assigned to the expansion project. Ewatomi's stomach tightened slightly. I applied like everyone else. I know that, Minji said. But rumors are getting weird. What kind of rumors? Minji hesitated, then sighed. Some people think the CEO is personally interested in you. Ewatomi forced a small laugh. That's ridiculous. Is it? The question hung awkwardly between them. Ewatomi quickly returned to her laptop. Minji, I barely talked to him. That's exactly what people find suspicious. Ewatomi didn't respond. Because the truth was complicated. Yes, they barely spoke. Yes, their meetings were strictly professional. But something invisible still existed between them. A tension neither of them had fully erased. And unfortunately, someone else had started noticing. 2 floors above the executive offices sat a smaller conference room used by board members. Inside, Director Park sat with 2 other investors. A tablet rested on the table in front of him. Displayed on the screen were security records, employee assignments, meeting schedules, and one specific name, Ewatomi. Park tapped the screen thoughtfully. Interesting. One of the investors leaned forward. What did you find? Park smiled faintly. She joined the company less than a month ago. And yet she's already working directly on the international expansion strategy. The other investor frowned. That could simply mean she's talented. Park nodded slowly. Yes, it could. He swiped to the next file. But she has also had multiple private meetings with the CEO. That made the room quiet. The second investor leaned back. You're suggesting favoritism. Park's smile sharpened. I'm suggesting something far more useful. Such as? Park folded his hands. Pressure. That evening, Ewatomi stayed late again preparing documents for the upcoming expansion launch. The office had grown quiet. Most employees had already left. The soft glow of her desk lamp illuminated the stacks of reports surrounding her. She rubbed her eyes, exhausted. Then her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. You should check the internal company forum. Her brow furrowed. Slowly, she opened the company network on her laptop. Then her heart dropped. A new anonymous post had appeared. The title alone made her stomach twist. Is Hanyul Tech CEO showing favoritism? Below it was a blurry photo, taken from across a hallway. The image showed Junhyuk standing near his office door, and Ewatomi beside him. The moment looked innocent, professional, but the caption underneath twisted the story. New employee meets privately with CEO multiple times. Coincidence, or something else? Comments were already flooding the post. Some employees defended her. Others weren't so kind. No one rises that fast without help. Maybe she has special connections. Or special relationships. Ewatomi's chest tightened painfully. Her fingers trembled slightly on the keyboard. This wasn't just gossip anymore. This was public. Inside the entire company. Her phone buzzed again. Another message. This time from Minji. Ewatomi, have you seen the forum? She didn't reply. Because at that moment, the office lights suddenly flickered slightly. Then she heard footsteps approaching. Slow. Calm. Familiar. Ewatomi looked up. Kang Junhyuk stood at the entrance of the office floor. His expression was darker than she had ever seen it. He walked directly toward her desk. Without a word, he placed his phone on the table. The same forum post glowed on the screen. You saw it, he said quietly. She nodded slowly. Silence stretched between them. Finally she spoke. This is bad. Yes. People are already talking. They will continue talking. Ewatomi stood up. This could destroy my reputation here. His eyes hardened slightly. No. But I won't allow it. The certainty in his voice startled her. You can't control rumors, she said softly. Junhyuk stepped closer. I can control what happens next. Ewatomi shook her head. That might make things worse. His gaze locked onto hers. Then what do you suggest? She hesitated, then said the hardest thing she could think of. Distance. He frowned slightly. For now, we shouldn't meet privately anymore. The words clearly irritated him, but he understood the logic. Fine, he said after a moment. But that doesn't solve the real problem. What problem? His voice dropped slightly. Someone inside this company is trying to use you against me. Ewatomi's eyes widened. You think this was planned? Junhyuk's expression became cold. Yes. And when I find out who did it? His voice trailed off. The calm billionaire mask had returned. But something dangerous now lived beneath it. Ewatomi suddenly realized something important. This scandal wasn't just about her reputation. It was a weapon. And someone powerful inside Hanyul Tech had just fired the first shot. Junhyuk picked up his phone again. Then he said quietly, "The board meeting is tomorrow morning." Her heart skipped. What does that have to do with this? He looked directly into her eyes. Everything. Because by tomorrow, the rumors about Ewatomi wouldn't just be whispers inside the office anymore. They would become a full corporate confrontation. And powerful men were already preparing to use her name to challenge the billionaire CEO himself. The morning after the scandal broke felt unusually tense inside Hanyul Tech. Luxury cars lined the entrance. Security stood slightly more alert than usual. Employees whispered quietly in elevators and hallways. Everyone had seen the post. Everyone had read the rumors. And everyone knew something important was about to happen. Because today, the board of directors would meet. And whenever powerful men gathered behind closed doors, someone's future was usually decided. Ewatomi stood near the large windows on the 32nd floor, staring out at the city. The Han River shimmered under the morning sun. Normally, the view calmed her. Today, it did nothing. Her phone buzzed again with new notifications. More comments. More speculation. She turned the screen off. Reading them wouldn't change anything. Behind her, Minji approached quietly. Are you okay? Ewatomi forced a small smile. I've been better. Minji hesitated. People are saying the board might investigate. I know. And if they do? Ewatomi finished the sentence for her. They might ask me to resign. Minji didn't respond. Because both of them knew it was possible. Ewatomi exhaled slowly. Moving to Seoul had been a huge risk. She had worked hard for this job. She refused to let rumors destroy everything. I'll face it, she said quietly. If they ask questions, I'll answer them. Minji nodded. You're braver than most people here. Ewatomi laughed softly. No. I'm just stubborn. But deep down, she couldn't ignore the fear growing inside her. Not for herself. But for him. Kang Junhyuk. Because she knew something others didn't. The board had been waiting for an opportunity to challenge his authority. And now they had won. 2 floors above, inside the executive conference room, the atmosphere was icy. 8 board members sat around the long glass table. At the head of the table sat Kang Junhyuk. His posture was calm. His expression unreadable. Director Park leaned back in his chair with quiet confidence. Let's address the matter directly, Park said. A screen on the wall lit up. The anonymous forum post appeared. So this is what the entire company is discussing today. Several directors exchanged uneasy glances. One spoke carefully. CEO Kang, do you have anything to say about these allegations? Junhyuk didn't immediately answer. He simply studied the image on the screen. Then he spoke calmly. Office rumors are not company policy. Director Park smiled thinly. Perhaps. But public perception can damage leadership credibility. Another director added. Employees are already questioning favoritism. Park leaned forward slightly. And unfortunately, Miss Ewatomi appears to be at the center of it. Silence filled the room. Then Park delivered his proposal. I believe the simplest solution is to remove her from the project, or from the company entirely. The words landed heavily. One director frowned. That seems extreme. Is it? Park replied smoothly. We must protect the reputation of Hanyul Tech. All eyes slowly turned toward Junhyuk. Waiting. Watching. Testing. Finally, he spoke. No. The single word was calm. But firm. Park raised an eyebrow. You refuse? Yes. Park's smile faded slightly. Then perhaps the board should vote. Before anyone else could respond, the conference room doors suddenly opened. Everyone turned. Ewatomi stood at the entrance. The room fell silent. She walked inside slowly, her hands steady despite the tension. I believe this conversation is about me, she said. Director Park looked mildly surprised. This is a private meeting. Then I apologize, she replied calmly. But I thought it would be fair if the person being judged had the chance to speak. Some directors nodded quietly. Park leaned back again. Very well. Speak.
Not as beautiful as you.
Ewatomi took a breath, then faced the room. I joined this company because I believed my work mattered. Her voice was clear, confident. I worked late nights. I studied every report. And every assignment given to me. She glanced briefly at Jun-hyuk before continuing. If anyone believes I advanced because of favoritism, then review my work. Several directors exchanged thoughtful looks. Ewatomi continued. But if my presence here is damaging the company. Her voice softened slightly. Then I will resign. Jun-hyuk's head turned sharply toward her. Ewatomi. She raised a hand gently. Let me finish. She faced the board again. I refuse to become a weapon in a political battle. The room remained silent. Director Park folded his hands slowly. A noble speech, he said. But sometimes noble intentions are not enough. That was when Kang Jun-hyuk finally stood. The movement alone shifted the energy in the room. When the CEO of a billion-dollar company stood like that, everyone listened. I've tolerated this discussion long enough, he said calmly. His eyes moved across the board members. You claim to care about the reputation of Hanyul Tech. He gestured toward Ewatomi. Yet you are prepared to sacrifice one of the most capable analysts in the company over an anonymous rumor. Park frowned slightly. This is about leadership perception. No, Jun-hyuk said quietly. This is about power. Silence. Then he said something no one expected. If any employee should be questioned. His gaze hardened. It should be me. The directors shifted uncomfortably. Park leaned forward. Are you admitting something? Jun-hyuk's voice remained steady. Yes. Ewatomi's eyes widened slightly, because she had no idea what he was about to say. The room held its breath. Then Kang Jun-hyuk spoke clearly. I met Ewatomi before she joined this company. Shock rippled through the room. Park's smile returned. Interesting. But, Jun-hyuk continued calmly, her employment was approved by the recruitment department long before I knew she would work here. He paused. And her performance speaks for itself. The directors looked toward the reports on the screen. Park tried again. Even so, the perception remains. Jun-hyuk stepped closer to the table, then delivered the final blow. If the board believes my leadership is compromised. His voice remained completely calm. You are welcome to challenge it. The room froze, because everyone understood what he meant. Kang Jun-hyuk owned the majority controlling shares of Hanyul Tech. Removing him would be nearly impossible. Director Park slowly leaned back. For the first time, he had no immediate reply. The meeting ended shortly after. The board quietly dismissed the topic. No vote was taken. No resignation demanded. The scandal dissolved almost as quickly as it appeared. Later that evening, Ewatomi stood outside the building entrance. The cool Seoul air brushed gently against her face. Behind her, the glass tower of Hanyul Tech glowed against the night sky. She heard footsteps approach. Jun-hyuk stopped beside her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then she said softly, You didn't have to defend me like that. He looked at the city lights. Yes, I did. You could have avoided the whole situation. Perhaps. She turned toward him. Why didn't you? He finally looked at her. And this time, there was no CEO mask. Just the man she met that night. Because some things are worth the risk. Her heart beat a little faster. And what happens now? Jun-hyuk considered the question carefully. Then he smiled faintly. Now. He looked up at the glowing tower behind them. You continue building your career. And you? I continue running my company. Ewatomi laughed softly. So nothing changes. His eyes met hers again. Oh, something definitely changed. She tilted her head slightly. What? He leaned a little closer and said quietly, This time, I'm not letting you disappear. The city lights shimmered around them, and somewhere between power, ambition, and fate, two people who were never supposed to meet again had just begun a story neither of them could control.